Rookie hype is all the rage this time of the year. The NFL draft just got done. We've got these new players that everybody wants to be the first one to say, I called it, that guy's a stud, or he's a breakout candidate, or whatever it may be. And unfortunately, it tends to overhype some of the rookies. And while some of them will be instant impact fantasy football superstars, which I already talked about this week, some of them may be overvalued and may not be in the best position to give you some fantasy support right off the bat. It could take weeks, it could take a year, but some of these guys, which I'll talk about today, may not be who you need for 2025, regardless of how good their outlook is moving forward over the next several years. And the first guy that I'm already worried about being overdrafted in 2025 is Tayvon Henderson, running back out of Ohio State that was just drafted by the New England Patriots. And you're gonna make a couple of arguments for Tayvon Henderson being the number one back right away. He was drafted by a new coaching staff. That's absolutely true. And his draft capital also leans towards him being utilized a little bit heavier than what a lot of people may anticipate. But the problem with that is the fact that the New England Patriots are paying Ramondre Stevenson a lot of money, starter level money, and they can't really get out from underneath that contract right away. In 2025, Ramondre Stevenson's cap hit is going to be just over $5.5 million. And then in 2026, his cap hit is going to be $7.6 million. And if they want to get out from underneath that contract, it's going to be at least $6.5 million in dead cap money that they're going to have to pay. So why would you not play Ramondre Stevenson when you're paying him to be on the roster anyway? And why would you cut him or trade him just to have to pay that much money regardless? In 2025, Ramondre Stevenson is not going anywhere. Now, I'm not trying to say that Ramondre Stevenson will score more fantasy points than Tayvon Henderson. And I'm not even trying to say that Ramondre Stevenson is going to be a fantasy stud this year. More than likely, you're going to see a very split backfield, with Ramondre Stevenson leading the charge and Tayvon Henderson seeing a lot of passing down work and third down work as well. Will he be filtered in and off the field with Stevenson? Absolutely, but we could see a very, very even split this year, which would not allow either of these guys to be fantasy studs right away. In fact, it would be a huge headache to try and own either one of them, because more than likely you'll be disappointed more times than not, especially if the defense for New England is good this season and they're throwing the football more often with Drake May. If they're leading games, Ramondre Stevenson might see those snaps later on. But if Ramondre Stevenson does have fumble issues and can't hold on to the football like he did at times last year, you're going to see Tayvon Henderson get some extra work. But don't forget, they have Antonio Gibson as well. So while Tayvon Henderson is the new guy, drafted by the new regime and has the draft capital, there's a lot of things in Ramondre Stevenson's contract that's going to keep them from parting ways with him right away. And you still have Antonio Gibson. And sticking with running backs that could be overhyped in 2025, Jaden Blue is another name I'm a little concerned about people getting way too attached to this season. Jaden Blue is going to be coming to the Dallas Cowboys as a receiving type of running back that has explosive capabilities. And I think a lot of people are going to feel like that's going to fit perfectly, especially after they just traded for George Pickens. But I think the running backs on the roster that are going to get the first look will be the veterans, especially Javonte Williams. Now, Miles Sanders is also on the roster, and they drafted Phil Maffa out of Clemson. When you take a look at Jaden Blue, yes, he could end up seeing a decent amount of third down work right away, but do we think Deuce Vaughn is just going to end up disappearing too? I know it's been a little bit of time, but you may have forgotten how good Javonte Williams was his rookie season in Denver. Going all the way back to 2021, he looked like the next great explosive running back in the NFL. His 63 missed tackles forced were second in the NFL, and his yards after contact per attempt ranked 7th. This dude was absolutely insane when it came to his playmaking ability in the backfield. But unfortunately, the year after, only 4 games into the season, he had a devastating knee injury. Now, sometimes it takes a little bit for them to come back. He comes back, he's working through that knee injury, he has a new head coach in Sean Payton, and a new offense that he has to work through, so that first year back doesn't look great. Last season, there was really no rhyme or reason to how Javonte Williams was going to be used. Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin each saw more than 100 carries last season, while Audric Estime had 76 to his name. And they passed the ball a lot, with Bo Nix also running the ball a little bit here and there. But there was never really any rhyme or reason to why somebody was being used. Why was McLaughlin on the field? Why was Estime on the field? One week, Javonte Williams would be the starter. The next, it would be McLaughlin. The week after that, it was Estime. It was really hard to try and keep track of who was being utilized at any given time for the Denver Broncos. And it is very hard to get any type of a rhythm going if you don't really know what your job is anyway. In Dallas, Javonte Williams is going to know what his job is. They've done a little bit of work on the offensive line, which will absolutely be great. And then on top of it, they've added George Pickens to make this passing game a little bit more explosive. So for me, Javonte Williams is going to be the number 1 back in Dallas this year. And Jaden Blue is going to have a ton of work to try and get up to even being considered the number 2 running back, where he would be behind CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson for potential targets. So if you're looking for that late round stash as a rookie, I don't know if Jaden Blue will end up being that guy. Even if you're drafting him to back up Javonte Williams, I still don't know if he would end up being the one that we want to roll with. I think a lot of people, myself included, were caught off guard when Emeka Ibuka was the pick at number 19 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I love Ibuka. If you include Travis Hunter, he was my wide receiver 4 in this year's draft class. And I thought he had some fringe round 1 potential based on really the tools alone. But when you looked at the first round and what teams needed, it really felt like he was going to be a second round pick. And then Tampa Bay said, nope, screw it. We're going to take Ibuka. Even though we have Mike Evans, even though we decided to re-sign Chris Godwin, even after his injury, and also on top of it, Jalen McMillan had a breakout towards the end of last season. Oh, Cade Otton is still there as well. So they have plenty of pass-catching weapons. And as much as I love Ibuka, in what world do we see him being the type of guy that we can draft as being a consistent wide receiver 2? And I'm not going to give any names because I do not want anybody to take this account serious. But apparently somebody over on Twitter thinks Emeka Ibuka is the wide receiver 11 heading into 2025. Yeah, that's way too spicy for me. Putting Ibuka inside the top 24 is probably also too spicy as well. Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans have a really, really good connection. I love what those two can do, and Mike Evans should be the wide receiver 1 once again. Really, the only way Emeka Ibuka becomes fantasy relevant this year is as Chris Godwin misses a significant amount of time, which as of this point, we're not 100% sure what Godwin will look like heading into 2025. So we definitely may need to switch this up when we get towards the beginning of the season if Chris Godwin is not going to be healthy to start the year. But even if he isn't healthy, Jalen McMillan should still see some decent targets, and Cade Otton, he'll be up and down with his target share as well. Ibuka is a fabulous talent, and I really like what he can do for Tampa Bay in years to come. But in 2025, if we're drafting him to give us wide receiver 2 type numbers, we could be disappointed more times than not. Through the first 7 games last season, Chris Godwin saw at least 8 targets in every single game but 1. Jalen McMillan at the end of the season was a go-to touchdown weapon for Baker Mayfield. And Mike Evans will still be a dominant deep threat like he has been over the course of his career, with the potential of another 1,000-yard season incoming. So for Ibuka, he's going to have some good games. If Chris Godwin misses time, it definitely gives him a better opportunity. But as the way things stand right now, you cannot overdraft Emeka Ibuka because he will not give you the consistency that you would need given where his ADP could be. When I sat down to start researching and scouting the 2025 NFL draft class, there was one name that was consistently talked about being way higher than I ever had him ranked throughout the entire process. It was Luther Burden. And I do believe that even when it comes to fantasy football now, people are going to be a lot higher on him in 2025 than what I will be. Now, my comp for Luther Burden was Amon-Ra St. Brown. So it makes a ton of sense that Ben Johnson is the one to draft Luther Burden. But I'm not expecting Amon-Ra St. Brown light production from Luther Burden in 2025 because their first round pick was on Colston Lovelin, who, by the way, is the second receiving tight end that they now have on their roster next to Cole Kmet. You still have DJ Moore, and you have last year's first round pick, Rome Odunze, as well. Keenan Allen is gone. That's great. But that is a lot of weapons that you have to try and work through. Now, the path to success for Luther Burden in 2025 at this current moment may be playing as a running back, which is super weird to hear. But Amon-Ra St. Brown did that at times for the Lions too, where he would line up in the backfield, take end around, handoffs, different things like that, where he was utilized in the short to intermediate portion of the field, which is where Luther Burden will be extremely successful. And DeAndre Swift was already ran out of one organization by Ben Johnson. It wouldn't shock me if he's not super excited about having him as well. There's a lot of talk about potentially like Nick Chubb signing with the Chicago Bears once he shows that he's fully healthy. So keep an eye out for that. Luther Burden is going to have to be utilized everywhere. Do we think he's going to get more targets than DJ Moore? I would doubt it. Do we think he's going to get more targets than what Rome Odunze would get? I highly doubt it. So then, in the area of the field which he works the best, he has to compete with Cole Kmet and Colston Lovelin, where Ben Johnson loves to utilize 2 tight end sets or 12 personnel. So now you have on the field 2 tight ends, you have 2 wide receivers, which all come down to DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Colston Lovelin, and Cole Kmet. So does Luther Burden play like in the slot and you run 3 wide? Does he play in the backfield and play as a wide receiver? Does he run like an H-back? Where does Luther Burden fit in? Now, Ben Johnson is the type of guy that can get Luther Burden involved. But based on all of that information, how often? He's going to have some big games. He's going to have some touchdowns, and he's going to have some crazy plays where you go, that guy needs more touches. But in 2025, the touches just will not be there consistently. All right, I'm just going to stick with the Chicago Bears here for a second. And let's talk about Colston Lovelin, because a lot of the points that I just made about Luther Burden are going to be true for Colston Lovelin as well. Now, I know you see the Lions helmets in the background, and I'm not hating on the Chicago Bears. Hiring Ben Johnson was a home run. I don't hate what they did in the draft either. They are going to have a ton of offensive weapons, and they are going to be much better in 2025. But talking about it from a fantasy perspective is way different. And trying to find enough targets for all of these guys to be fantasy relevant on a consistent basis, it doesn't matter how good this offense is. That is going to be the issue. Think about the Detroit Lions last year, or even the year before that. Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the one consistent in their offense outside of the run game. Now, Chicago may need to pass the ball a little bit more because their run game will not be nearly as good as what it was in Detroit. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find consistent targets, because did Jameson Williams get consistent targets last year? No. He had some really good games, but it was hard to try and predict when he would have those games sometimes. Sam Laporta was the same way. It was rough trying to get Sam Laporta into your fantasy lineups at the beginning of the season. Now, towards the end, he got a lot better, but a lot of that had to do with all of the firepower that was in that Lions offense. You could argue that the firepower for the Chicago Bears this year is actually better than what the Lions are. I'm a Michigan fan. Colston Lovelin is a beast. I've watched this guy be one of the better tight ends in all of the country over the last couple of years, and nobody really knew about it until the NFL draft process started to peak up. But Colston Lovelin is going to kill defenses down the seam in those vertical routes. but he's not going to do it on a consistent basis. He's going to score some touchdowns, but he's not going to do it on a consistent basis. And if you're running 12 personnel and Cole Kmet is going to be out there quite a bit with Colston Lovelin, then you have to assume that Cole Kmet is going to take some targets away from Colston Lovelin as well. So from a pure football standpoint, this offense is set up to be very, very good. But from a fantasy standpoint, Luther Burden and Colston Lovelin are going to be guys that are just going to be difficult having any type of consistency, even if their big playmaking ability is going to entice you at times. But Headliner Nation, that's just a few of the rookies that I really feel like could be overvalued by fantasy owners in 2025 fantasy redraft leagues. But what do you think? Who are some rookies that you feel may be overdrafted? And if you missed it, YouTube is going to recommend my last video to you, which was all about the rookies that I feel could be instant impact players for 2025. The exact opposite of what we talked about today. Make sure you also go out and you get your draft guide, ladies and gentlemen. It's currently available. There's already tons of information being uploaded, especially for you dynasty degenerates out there. But anyone that does anything fantasy football, you're going to be able to utilize all the knowledge currently in there, and redraft information will continue to populate and update throughout the entire summer. Headliner Nation, stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.